Now, today we're going to talk about one aspect of SDR performance and in the area of time management. And then next time, I think it's next week actually, we're going to talk about how to retain and enhance the talent that you have internally. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the essentially time management as one of three facets of building SDR accountability. And it's all about really getting the SDRs to do the work in what we call time blocks, and also to be able to take those skills and continually improve them. So while I think there are three facets, and we discussed this in the book of time management, of SDR effectiveness. We're going to talk today about time management. Personal effectiveness and communication are also two facets that make up this triad, and those are discussed in great length in the book, Predictable Prospecting. So today's webinar is really focused on four aspects of time management: focus, schedule, plan, and delegate. And I'm going to go through in order of each of these. There's no particular priority of each of these facets, but there are pieces underneath each that I want you to internalize and actually start putting into practice, because that's really what it's all about with us at Top of Funnel, is that we don't need really the epic skills to be truly remarkable and consistent SDR, but we do need a reliable process to follow. And so this particular aspect of the webinar is all about the processes that we can use to really excel at these four areas of time management. Principle number one is focus. Now, in focus, really it's the gateway to being a successful SDR. And focus is broken down into two areas: macro and micro. Now, a lot of us are really good at the macro part of things by setting specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound goals, which we call SMART goals. But where we fall apart a bit is on these micro focus areas, which really is looking at results-driven activities instead of what I call vanity activities, and also removing distractions. Now, this is tough. I mean, I have two kids. They're both in the millennial realm of being born, and so they have issues with multitasking versus single tasking. They have been brought up in a world where that's what they do, is multitasking. And what I'm asking you to consider as a manager or even as a business developer is to take that multitasking out of your habit and really focus on single tasking activities. Now let's start by looking at the actual macro goals, those SMART goals. To the left are the goals that I like to track with clients, because they are the goals that give us action and momentum, as opposed to just motion, going through the motions, which is what the goals on the right are, in my opinion. And I also call them affectionately vanity goals, because having these counts are good, but it really doesn't give you that action that you need. It's more of motion, the number of SQLs, number of calls, number of dials. But what does that mean, and how is that correlated to actual movement through the pipeline and the reduction of lag? So if we look down the SMART goals that I want you to consider deploying in your framework, in your daily rhythms, and also into your reporting, whether you look at your reports daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, these are 7 that you don't need to put them all in, but I want you to take a look at them. And I'll just give you a moment to look at those.
And Mary Lou, if I can jump in real quick, this is very interesting. What in particular made you choose these 7? I see they're very much effectiveness goals in terms of how you're performing, maybe the equivalent of field goal percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain? Maybe you can jump in this later, but I'm just interested in seeing what prompted these goals in particular to be chosen. The
Predictable Revenue book has on page 42, which I I always use this page now. Everybody goes scrambling for their book. But there is a formula on page 42 of Predictable Revenue that gives us predictable revenue formula. It's the actual formula. So these particular entries, these fields, these data elements are the elements that we use to calculate predictable revenue. And in a nutshell, what it is we're looking at the actual pipeline itself. So intra and inter stage conversion rates. We're looking at pipeline lag, and we're also looking at the average deal size and how that affects the the revenue piece. But those first two, which is the pipeline itself and lag, are what are represented in these 7 actual goals.
And
Now, go ahead.
Just to interject real quick, Mary Lou, we had a question. What is SQL distribution variance? Can you break that down?
That is essentially when I generate an SQL, what is the source of that SQL? What did it come from an outreach or a targeted campaign? Did it come from me doing some executive briefings, us going to a trade show, and essentially how is that distributed across those different channels? Because right now, if we lump it all into number of SQLs, how do we know which of our channels are performing better? In our world, we're constantly trying to improve our conversion rates. So we need more information to tell us where that lead came from and how it's converting in that family rather than just a general overall number. So that's what I'm trying to get you guys thinking is go down a few notches, drill a little bit deeper into the weeds to really understand where you should be spending your marketing dollars, your outreach dollars. We don't know unless we start thinking about the source, the lead source. So that's what that is.
Great. That's perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we look at number 4, that's a predictable revenue number, the positive, negative, neutral. But what we've done now is we're looking at hyper-personalized email response rates. So hyper-personalized by definition is going in and modifying a template of the email as opposed to having your marketing automation system sending out emails on your behalf, what I call the while you're sleeping engine. This particular one is looking at the hyper-personalized because we want to know how much time, human time, an SDR is spending on hyper-personalization. That affects the lag. That affects the pipeline velocity. So as you look through these, and I do expand on them, I think, in later slides, but we're really looking at meaningful conversations. We're looking at the effectiveness of voicemail because a lot of my clients just send voicemails and we don't, and they don't track. Did I get a response back? Did that voicemail result in someone coming inbound and filling out a form? Did it result in someone downloading a white paper? So we want to know all of that. We want to know that behavior because we're trying to track the behavior to shrink it so that we can reduce the lag, the amount of time it takes from an initial conversation to a qualified opportunity. So let's get into the single tasking. For sure, single tasking is better selling. It's proven. There's been so many studies regarding it. I mean, ad nauseum of what the results are if we focus on single tasking. And in our world, in the SDR world, we can do that by organizing our day into blocks. And I'll show you a picture of a sample SDR workflow and also one I personally use when I'm in my home office to block out my day. There is a myth that millennials are better at multitasking, which, it's debunked by multiple studies, one of them Stanford University. So I really think that one of the most impactful things you can take away from this seminar or webinar is the fact that single tasking is really where you want to focus your effort when you're organizing your day, or if you're a manager, you're organizing your troops, their day. So here's some single tasking samples or examples that you can take a look at. One of the most important ones for us is phone block time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's also, the other one is research and hyper-personalization, and this is for account-based selling, or if you're working core accounts, those accounts where you've decided that you're going to add more muscle to generating that first appointment or that first meeting, because these accounts are accounts that you've targeted from your top 20 that you want as net new logos. The other thing, single tasking sample, is what I call first and 10. This is borrowed from the real estate industry, and it's really building your social network for referrals. And I'll talk a little bit about that. The other one is writing. SDRs do a lot of writing. So really working on your writing skills is good to put in a block of time. And role playing, of course, is just paramount to us improving on the phone, to handling objections, and we blend role play into our daily rhythm. If we do that every day, we're going to eke out those improvements, and the improvements compound upon themselves. So it's not like you have to come in knowing everything, but if you chunk away at stuff and you think about the compound effect of doing that, then you're, by the end of the year, by the end of the quarter, you're going to start seeing improvements. So the first thing to look at is the funnel. As we mentioned, the cold calling 2.0, which was predictable revenue funnel. Here's a sample funnel of one of my clients that has a blended inbound and outbound. And I showed this last time. They also have EMEA versus USA, and they have different ways that they require their ADRs, they call them, account development reps. So this is the first start in figuring out what your metrics should look like, how much personal human time versus leveraging technology time that you need to put in. So you need to graph this out. This is a typical predictable revenue, predictable prospecting funnel for generating qualified opportunities. So down the left side, is in that orange are inbound leads that are coming in from marketing efforts, and the dark blue side on the right there is all outbound efforts. So each of those stages, cold, working, qualified, and one dot identified, are stages in the pipeline that we have designated as ones that we think are worthy of tracking in order to be able to reduce lag. So we take each horizontal area where it says cold new is one example, and we're going to put metrics in there that are intra-stage or within the stage. And then as we move from cold to working, we're going to put metrics in that are inter-stage so that we can see what's happening going from cold to working, how long it takes, what kind of leads are going in there, what the source of those leads are, what kind of activities that are actionable and meaningful the SDRs had to put against those records to move them physically from cold to working. So that those are those metrics I showed you before and why we think they're important. The next thing you need to do is determine the metrics and how you're going to track them into your database or your customer relationship system, your CRM. This is a sample from one of my clients of what we decided are the metrics we're going to track in each of the stages. So cold and new, working, qualifying, they even track MQL. And then short codes of what we're going to put inside the database so that we can build our dashboards and our reports based on the fields. So typically, if you're a Salesforce user, for example, you may log an activity, and the type field that we're going to log would be where these short codes would be located. So there would be a pick list, really simple, and you pick which one of these you're doing. That allows us to see whether we're using human time with personal emails, whether we have the cold email engine is working, or we have to initiate a phone call in to find the right person. And all just these simple codes tell us how long things are taking and whether we're using technology to the optimum, or we have to overlay that with human time just to get our response rates up. That last row there where it says automated timers, that helps us understand how long a record was sitting in queue, meaning sitting in the stage, which we want to do and we want to know so that we can calculate the lag. Again, under the focus, I like to understand how much human time we take on things versus automation. Obviously, the more we can put into automation, but also have it be impactful and resonate with our prospects and convert at higher conversion rates, that's where we want to put a lot of our effort if we can. But if we have horrible response rates, open rates, click-through rates, then we're going to need human resources in order to generate essentially conversation. So again, if we look at that cold working qualifying, which are the stages in the upper pipeline, I've outlined what's a human resource, what's automation, and then on the green area are samples of weekly goals. So we're starting to build the metrics that we need so that we can see what the time management needs are for our SDR. If you don't have something like this, how do you know what they're spending time on and where the gunk is starting to form or where things are getting sluggish? If you break it down like this into these chunks, you're able to then really analytically look at this and be realistic in how long things take to get from one stage to another, or even within a stage. How long do things take? What does that mean for you? Your forecasts are going to be a lot more reliable if you do this planning piece first. So this is an example.
And Mary Lou, like, how much time would you say that managers need to? I mean, how much of their time should they be focusing on analyzing this and making sure the processes are all right and tweaking and like what percentage of their time per week would you say?
Well, that's a very good question, because a lot of managers are probably rolling their eyes right now saying, this looks like it's a lot of time. Initially, when we're ramping, we need a daily look at the metrics, because we want to make sure that we're catching bad habits, we're catching things that are just grossly inaccurate or underestimated, and fixing them right away. So, once we get the dashboards in place, it's 5 to 20 minutes of time. In fact, I did a webinar for someone just a few years ago that went through each of the dashboards and guesstimated the amount of time they need to look at them. And I think it was between 5 and 20 minutes on a weekly basis once they get up to ramp. But then you got to take that 5 to 20 minutes and plop it into the days of the week when you're ramping. If you have a good team who is based on the hiring that we talked about last week, you don't need to micromanage as much. But if you've got a team where you're all over the map, then you're going to have to kind of reel them in, which means you'll probably have to put somewhere between 20, 25 minutes a day to get started. And then the goal is to get that down to 20 minutes a week.
That makes a lot of sense. So basically, you might be at the beginning sacrificing a little bit of activity time and a little bit of that extra go initially to make sure that everything's coordinated, under control, and you have full visibility and everyone's ramping up.
Right.
The same way. Makes sense.
And then, not unlike sculpting, like if you're sculpting your body and you want to work on your legs one week, you may be focused on the cold cue for 1 week and then, get that thing humming and then work on the working cue. So what this does for you, I think, is break it down into manageable chunks so you're not overwhelmed, because you're looking at essentially all the components of a highly functioning pipeline, and you know where you need to zero in because your reporting will tell you.
Absolutely. And is there a particular way you think managers can, for people who are trying to figure out off the bat, how can I make the reporting side of this as easy as possible? I mean, aside from CRM, is there other stuff too that you see people using?
We try to work within whatever they've got. So since I'm a programmer at heart, I'm not as enamored with tools and things. So if they have a way to track in a database, even I've done this with people in Excel. I mean, that's the lowest common denominator of it all. And as high as a business intelligence system that sits over the entire ecosystem and brings in data from every single sales office. So I've been at that level all the way down to ticks on a piece of paper.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'll also add in from our side, ambition. This is kind of where we in fact can help start helping. I guess is we have tools like outreach. If you have outreach, Salesforce, and ambition, let's say outreach, you're automating, make sure all the data is accurate when they're making a phone call or doing email or anything like that.
Right.
And with ambition, you can actually set up to where all the metrics are mapped into from Salesforce into a very organized central location. You can set up these advanced metrics that you're starting to build out here.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
don't have to do the manual drudgery of it.
Right. And that's really ideal because you want to leverage technology where technology makes sense. And also you want to minimize the number of keystrokes that your SDRs have to do. I remember talking to somebody where it took 5 clicks to get like a call started. And if I had that in my call center with 250 agents, each having to click 5 times, we would never get anything done. So, we really we want to think of this formula of return on effort. We want to minimize and what they have to do so we maximize the return on effort. That's where we're going with all of this. So we need to leverage technology where it makes sense, but don't have it be so cumbersome that we can't get anything done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say from our own personal experience here at Ambition with, start trying to build out a sales team initially and maybe not having this process in place, we learned the hard way. And we've really kind of finally adapted to it. I feel like this is where everyone who eventually hits that high growth mode gets to sooner or later. It's just better to get to it sooner, right?
It's better to get to it sooner. And the other kind of recurring theme that we've been talking about is planning this out before you start executing. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be, like 100% where you thought you would be. But if you put it down on paper and really think it through and plan it out, then you're going to execute with a higher conversion rate. It just works that way. So here's some questions to ask yourself when you're thinking about the focus facet of time management for SDRs is, what are your 5? What's your Fab 5 is what I used to call it. And just start with 5, just or 3. It doesn't really have I gave you 7, but you can just start with 3 that you think are going to give you, from a macro point of view, the conversion rate of moving from stage to stage to stage, and also within the stage, what is that intelligent metric that you can stick there that that it's going to give you a good read? I mean, it's all about that. It's what you need in order to make better decisions more quickly, and also to be able to use that lean methodology of looking at it, measuring it, improving it, trying it against the control, and keep doing that so you're getting that percent increase over the course of time till you've got a highly functioning machine out there. So just pick your top. Use some of mine, create your own, but just make sure they're not vanity. They're not just totals. I don't like totals. I like variances. I like correlations. I like standard deviations. It may be because I'm a math geek, but that gives you a lot more information in order to be able to create a predictable revenue framework.
And this is an extreme example, Mary Lou, but this is a case in point. We work with one of our biggest clients is West Corporation, their revenue generation services for credit cards. And they actually ran an internal case study with Ambition. And what they used us for was to start measuring. They started out measuring like something like 30 potential metrics, like you said, with various sort of advanced metrics in there and all that stuff. And they were able to eventually drill down to 5 after a 3-month period. And they started out showing all 30. And then by the time they were focusing the reps on, okay, these 5 metrics are what are going to drive your, closing deals.
Right.
That's how they end up increasing their revenue with us by about,
Yeah.
I think it's about 20%. So yeah, it's proven to work. That was their case study they ran internally. So yeah, it does work in real life.
Yeah. And, there's so many examples of that. I mean, one example we did, I think a couple weeks ago, was this whole idea of personas and persona development, sales versus marketing. Marketing may have 30 personas developed. We need 3 because all we're trying to do is start conversation with people we don't know, or get that first meeting, or get our toe in the door. We're not going to necessarily talk to 30 people, but there are probably 3 that we can navigate in the organization, especially for upmarket, that we can get conversations who will actually refer us in. So the same thing, start with maybe a little bit more than you think, or just pick the ones you think are going to work and constantly iterate and constantly measure. That's really what you want to do. The next question to ask yourself as you look around your room and you see your folks, if you're a manager, or just ask yourself, do I single focus or do I multitask? If you are in block time and you are calling and then checking your email or then researching, that is multitasking. That is not what I want you to do. I want you to create your call list at the end of the day when it's dead time, meaning the phone is just not going to work and you know that, and create your call list for the next day, the 25 to 50 people that you are going to call the next day. Do your research then on them. Put little notes in the CRM if that'll help you if you need that. Move those over. If you're using like Salesforce, do a view of them, create a URL, and then when you come in the next day, click on that URL, and voila, they're all in order for you to call. So you just basically start at the top and you work your way down. That is single focused. That is what is going to get you to quota and beyond, and get you those opportunities that you're looking for on a consistent basis. The next thing you want to look at is manual versus automation. Is it appropriately placed? If I'm using automation and it takes me 5 clicks to do something, is that appropriate? Is that really what you want? So really start scrutinizing even the tools you've got in place right now, or just sit down next to an SDR if you're a manager and watch what they're doing from an actual touching the keys point of view to see if they're spending too much time in wrap up. One of my clients was spending, I think, all said and done, 3 to 5 minutes wrapping up a call because they had to go to multiple systems to do things. Well, we narrowed that down to 30 seconds just by looking at that process and saying, well, this is crappy. We're not going to do this. Let's figure out a way to do this and still get everybody the information they need, but minimize the number of keystrokes. What that meant was their block times, they could add 3 to 5 more records or more for every half hour. So they contacted 3 to 5 more people over the course of 22 business days. Do the math. It's a lot more contacts. And it's because we were able to reduce the number of keystrokes. So look at manual versus automation and ask yourself, what am I asking my folks to do? Or even what am I doing when I'm making these phone calls, or when I'm doing my writing, or when I'm actually role playing? Am I leveraging technology appropriately, or as technology bogging me down? The next principle is scheduling. Now, this is probably one of my favorite ones, and it's where I get heavy-handed with clients in terms of I know what works. So, I try to be as accommodating as possible, but I know there are certain things that work, and the phone is one. Having run a call center for a long time, years and years, and having 250 agents, I know exactly what it means to have uninterrupted call blocks and what that means in terms of productivity. So here's some numbers for you. We strive to get up to 2 hours of block time. If you're fresh out and just starting, 30 to 45 minutes, and then as if, again, an athlete, you're working on running that marathon, work yourself up to the 2 hours over a course of time. I usually like to get ramped up in 4 to 6 weeks to 2-hour blocks from someone fresh out of college, for example. And then we're striving for 5 meaningful conversations within that call block. Now, this is one area we talked last week about. If you are an SDR and you're given 2-hour block times, you reserve the right to move that block time around in your day, because there may be some hours of the day that are best time to call. So you want to really focus on that. As an example, when I was in the SDR role for a company a few years ago, I found out that if I call between 7:30 and 8, that my block time could shrink from 2 hours to an hour, 15 minutes, because I got the same number of connects. So that's one thing I want you to really think about is, should I move this thing around so that my return on effort is maximized? The next area is writing. Non-prime calling hours are when you do your research and when you do your writing. That CWC is Compel with Content, which is a framework that I use with salespeople to teach them how to write emails so that they get higher response rates. And then lastly is role playing. Role playing is the staple of the successful SDR. And we embed the role play into the day and the life schedules. So you're role playing every single day to start. Once you start getting the rhythm down and you can hear yourself on the phone sounding very comfortable, where words roll off your lips, then you can reduce your role play to maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I still role play even after doing this now for almost 28 years as a business development type person. And I actually wrote a blog post on, I was getting rusty on my voicemail skills and my phone skills. So I showed how I practice in getting those skills back up. So here's a sample of the daily workflow. This is adapted from Predictable Revenue, but it's something that we start with clients, knowing that as the SDR, you want to be able to talk to your manager of breaking up this time if it's not working for your industry. Like if you're segmented and you've got East Coast, West Coast, or if you're doing certain geo areas or certain types of verticals, your block times may be different than your neighbor. So you want to really look at and play around with and let your manager know that it's important that you play around with block time just to see where the block should be placed so that you have that maximized return on effort. So I'll let you kind of absorb this graph, and if Jeremy, if you have any questions.
This is kind of the flow. It's a 1 hour, file maker. I know that they sort of follow something like this. I know market outreach. It's a big fan of these blocks. The blocks just work. I feel like the blocks are just how you like get that laser focus for an hour and you really like get people fired up. And it's all about the time constraint thing. It's funny. I feel like when you add a time constraint and when you all of a sudden create this sense of urgency, is what this does. It really motivates people and helps maintain focus, right?
Right, and this is also the enforcement of single tasking. So that's another way to look at this, is that some of you may look at this and say, wow, 5 hours of call time. Well, this is an example of 5 hours of call time, but this particular SDR is doing MQL, inbound follow-up. Their meetings are a lot longer to get to a qualified op. This particular SDR role, it takes 3 hours and 15 minutes to get from initial conversation to qualified opportunity. So you may not, if you're only generating an appointment based on an AWAF call, an Are We a Fit call, which is usually 15 minutes, then this is going to look a little bit different for you. But the point is that you are in charge of crafting with your team your plan, and then working with your block time to figure out where you need to move it around in order to maximize that return on effort. Get your 2 hour block time down to an hour 15 like I did, and still generate the meaningful conversations that you need in order to get the qualified ops you want every single month.
Yeah, I remember you saying, Mary Lou, too, if part of that's figuring out when client's most likely to answer, when prospect's going to be most ready to talk. Is it early in the morning? Is it late in the afternoon? And I think you made a very good point about that as well. So just wanted to add that in.
Yes, and the best time to call is actually used to be in eons ago, a call center. There were technology. So when we called through the predictive dialer and put a phone number in there, it would file the call in a different time zone or a different part of the day or day itself until it generated the best time to call for that particular phone number. We leverage technology for that, but you're a human who's going to leverage that for you in order to figure out where you should put your blocks. And then if you were on last week's webinar, that was one of the limiters, that I wouldn't hire a rep if I gave them a problem and said, look, here's a typical call day, and what would you do with this 2 hour block time if you discovered that your connects were bad? And the answer that they gave told me whether or not I should hire them. So that's how important block time is for me. Now, this block time is my personal block time, and it shows you in the blue area the amount of time I spend working on my business. So each day that I'm in my home office, I'm spending about 2 hours with clients, 2 hours on my intellectual property, and I write for 1 hour every single day. And I move that block around. So if I want to go for a long walk with my dogs, I may write in the morning or I may write at night. But I do get my hour in. It's just a matter of when. So I reserve the right to move this around so that I'm the most productive. And this I've been using for years. And it's just something because I have that systematic point of view of life that I don't need to have epic skills at everything, but I do need to have a reliable process that's going to get me the results I want. That's what this is going to do for you. So here's some questions to ask yourself with respect to scheduling. Do I have a schedule? And do I need an A and B, which some of my clients do?
Mario, let me, can I stop you for a second? Actually, we had a question come in. It's a little bit behind. I want to get too far past.
Oh,
how do you tell SDRs to handle scheduled meetings? I'm trying to make sure I'm reading this correctly. How do you tell SDRs to handle scheduled meetings? So how do you work if they have like a scheduled meeting, it's in a time like that's been blocked off? How's that work? She says that our SDRs are doing great, getting lots of live connects and meetings, but it gets in the way of their time blocking.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you have, let's go back to that schedule. If you have, like you can see there's qualification calls where I have 30-minute blocks for that. I look at my calendar and I schedule them just like you would on your personal calendar at home. If you know that, like me, I have office hours on Thursdays, but anyone can call me with any question they want. And I block it out from 1 to 3, for example. That's when you should try to get your clients or your prospects to schedule time. Don't let them dictate it if you can. Say, I've got these times available, pick one. And they should be within a scheduled block for qualification calls. It all works the same way, whether your outreach block time where you're trying to generate new opportunities, or you're doing qualification or AWAF calls. This particular schedule has an hour for qualification calls and follow-ups, and then another 30-minute block. So the goal is to try to get them all scheduled back to back within that block of time you've allocated in your day, preferably during admin time or during the non-fabulous calling time is when you want to schedule these types of calls. I hope that answered her question.
Yeah, I'll just add, because I have to do a lot of that too, actually, with how I work. And usually it's just, if you can just, throw out, if you try to take the lead with it, with, this time works best for me, and then this one, if not that, then this one maybe the next day or whenever. They usually you can, take that way, you can make sure you're not missing an opportunity to get it in a non-block time. So just having the first step there.
Yeah, I would make it the exception rather than the rule. So, put your block time in red. Do not cross, do not pass go, do not collect $200. Do not let anyone schedule in my red block time, which is my personal time to build new business, but there's always going to be someone who wants to grab that time, but make it the exception rather than the rule. 80% of the time you're able to do your block time. Maybe 20% you've got to acquiesce to a lovely prospect who only wants that time that's within your block time, but don't make it the rule. And I think you'll be a lot happier. So questions to ask on scheduling, again, we're going through here is, what's my adherence to the schedule? This is a big issue for me that I can tell when they're not adhering. So check that and make sure that they are adhering to schedule. And if it's not, get feedback from them and have them help design, and I'm talking from a manager point of view now, have them help design the schedule. Have them build the schedule with you as a manager, and then check their adherence to it. Because if they have an active participation in building it, or the AB, and they reserve the right to move things around, just get started until they're more, until the productivity is up. And then that way you can check on them periodically to see if they're still adhering to schedule and still doing their numbers. I've had some managers work it the other way around where they say, here's the block time, we're going to all start here. And then as we start bubbling up the numbers and our conversion rates, then I'm going to give you a little bit more leeway as to when you want to schedule your block time. It's all dependent on your style. Okay. I always kind of give them the benefit of the doubt that they know when a good time to call is, but that's not necessarily the way to go if you've got, especially fresh outs. You want to give them the actual schedule and say, look, we're all going to go here. We're going to check the response rates and our connect rates. And then from there, we're going to move it around and see how we do. Performance to benchmark is another area that I see is lacking. And this is a daily performance to benchmark check to start until we ramp, and then maybe weekly. But we want to see where we are relative to goal at all times. And, I do this in Excel for clients when I'm ramping, because sometimes the CRMs don't give us those immediate gratification percentages that I'm looking for. But you can go ahead and put those into the dashboards with those gauges that says, here we are relative to goal. And then daily numbers. Daily numbers to start are important for SDR teams. And these are the ones that I think are the most impactful to understanding whether or not we're leveraging technology properly, whether we're spending too much human time, even though we've got a gazillion tools that are supposed to help us be more productive, or whether, we're at a good mix, on that scale, what that scale is. I put this story, Saros and Round B financing, because one of my clients was able to get Round B financing just by continually showing the VC their meaningful conversation percentages and how consistent they were, and how those meaningful conversations translated into qualified ops, which then translated into new clients. So their entire existence was on this meaningful conversation metric. Remember we talked before about, what's your top 3 or your Fab 5? They use the MC as the number, and we're able to weave a story around that for their VCs to get Round B. So that was very exciting that they were able to do that. So, again, these codes that I'm throwing down here, they're invented by you. These are Mary Lou codes that I use to know whether we're doing human work, whether we're doing automation work, whether we're doing a highly personalized email versus having the the marketing automation system do the emails for us. Here's a quote from one of my pals, Aaron Ross, that he put in the forward of the new book. And without consistent time blocking, nothing else will predictably increase your sales pipeline. So if you just get that one thing right and do that all the time, and don't let prospects creep into your block time for non-business development activity, other than, that's furthering calls into the pipeline, that's getting people qualified, I get it, but you really want to have the engine include this consistent time blocking for that activity of starting conversations with people we don't know.
Love that quote. Just want to add, that's
this one.
There's something called, I read a blog post a while back. I'll link it here later, but it's called the flow zone, I believe, is what the time blocking ensures, and it keeps you focused, keeps you happy too, keeps your reps happy. With, the feeling they're progressing. And
running a call center, a fun way to do block time for those of you who are like, oh gosh, 2 hours, my people are going to kill me, is to start them with role playing. So we do 15 minutes of role play in our 2-hour block, and that warms them up, and then they get on the phones. And once they get on the phones, they get better and better and better each time they hang up the phone. And it's been proven over and over again over the years that the more you do of the phone work, especially, the more consistent you get, the more comfortable you get, your tonality improves, and as Jeremy said, you're happier. So really, really work on that one piece. The third one is to plan. Again, this is the lean and simple approach to planning your work and working your plan. So you want to design it first or plan it out. You want to measure it. You want to assess it. Then iterate based on what you think is the next logical one thing to change. I'm not a fan of changing a ton of stuff. I like to do one thing at a time because then we have apples to apples conversion. But again, if you're assessing and iterating on an email sequence, you may want to take email number 2 and just do the subject line. That would be one thing for email number 2. Don't do the subject line and the body because that's 2 things. So try to keep it simple, down to one thing for each thing that you're changing so that you can measure it against the control. And then from there, you want to be able to set activity goals at a glance. This is very simple, very accountable. Over on the left-hand side, I show, what's hourly, what's daily, what's weekly, what's monthly, and what's by buyer persona in this case. This is something that was meaningful for one of my clients, and we worked out that these were the actual goals we were trying to get to.
Very interesting.
Now, some of these are predictable revenue numbers, like that 250 weekly emails to send is still predictable revenue. It still works today, still is my go-to kind of benchmark ramp number that allows me to show clients that we are moving. Maybe, we're moving consistently, and eventually we're going to get to our goal within a reasonable amount of time. You can see here the monthly qualified ops is 8. That is based on a 3-hour, 15, what we call scoping call, which is 15 minutes of are we a fit, followed by 1 hour of discovery with your persona, followed by a 2-hour team call with the folks over at the prospect's place, maybe more people coming into a meeting. Your results will differ based on your talk times of what it takes to get from that initial conversation all the way to qualified op. Here's some more benchmarks. These are the ones that I use with clients. And here now you're starting to see where I'm talking about the inter-stage and intra-stage type of metrics that I look at. A big one for me is the third row down, the number of ops accepted by the quota-carrying direct sales guy, or AE is what we call them. So if you have split roles, I look here immediately when I come into a client because sometimes this number is as low as 35%. So for every 10 ops the SDR generated, the AE only accepted 3.5. That's horrible. It should be 9 out of 10 at least. So I look at that. Sometimes clients don't know their numbers, so we just start tracking them. Questions to ask when you're planning. Is it crazy? Do I have like a spider web or, like a ball of yarn that's got knots in it? Or is it like small, more manageable? I can breathe deeply, what I'm looking at is going to give me a good picture of where I'm at. Begin always with the end in mind. How many qualified opportunities do you need to make each month per SDR? Then divide that into how much talk time do I think they're going to take to do that? What's the lag? And you'll come up with some nice metrics that will help you get there. And in 3 to 5, Fab 5 is what I talked about before, to be able to do that. Is this a logical or wishful mindset? And my story around this is when I came in the SDR role for that company up in Seattle, the CEO and the board members got in a room and shouted out, "We want 15 new logos per business developer this year." And I looked at them and my first question was, what is that based on? What is the data that supports that we could do that? And there was no data. So really think about if you're starting out, be realistic. If you are coming into a situation where you have a history, look at the history and see what happened. If your close rates are 5%, but you need them to be 40% in order to do these 15 new logos, it's not going to happen unless something drastic happens. So be very logical and have a mindset around what you can do that is realistic. It's okay to have those stretch goals, like this particular one had the stretch goal of 15 new logos. We brought in 10, but that was not acceptable because 15 was their absolute minimum. The conversion rate calculations we talked about before by source of lead are very important. Different leads convert differently, and you want to spend your effort working on the ones that have the biggest return on effort and are the least costly. I mean, that's the goal. is to really get to a rhythm where the leads aren't going to cost a lot of human time, of automation time, of generating time, but they're going to generate the revenue that you need and the lifetime value you're looking for in a client. Automate as many manual processes as you can. That also, in that same bucket, is look at your current tools and see if they're causing your reps to do more work because of this whole click-through phenomenon or click phenomenon. If they're doing multiple things and it takes a long time to get to that first phone call because they have to go into multiple tools, it may not be a good tool for you. Consolidate duplication where you can, and your gut check. Gut check always, is this a good return on effort for me? Or am I spending more time spinning my wheels than I should? The last principle is to delegate. And a delegate is really, this poor lion is delegating his captivity to a mouse to cut the string. Where
I love the illustrations here, by the way. The questions are impeccable. Great work, really.
I'm trying to make it fun too. But, delegation, and I'll admit, I'm not a great delegator myself, but, I work towards trying to delegate things. So these are the tips that I'm giving you or what I use on a daily basis to determine whether something is worth delegating and whether I should really consider it. The tasks to delegate are those that are not part of those focus goals we set up above. An example of that would be if you want your reps to build records as they go along, net new we call them. If it's not part of a focus goal, don't put them in that task because it takes a while to stick a new client record or contact record in the database, especially if they're doing research to figure out the email address and the contact information. Look to see whether that's something that you want to delegate to offshore, to another list vendor. Really start breaking down that funnel and the tasks within the funnel and see which of those are good things to delegate. The tasks to keep are the ones that you're uniquely qualified to do and that cost less than 10 minutes of your time. This is where I struggle. This is one I like to keep everything, but it's not realistic. So really look at an example here is researching into the core accounts. If the core accounts are your focus, then you want to make sure your reps are focused on that. But watch to see how much time it's taking them though to research what they need to do in order to be able to have those hyper-personalized emails and those meaningful conversations where the prospect knows that you've taken time to research who they are, why they matter, how you fit in, and what the next step should be. The tasks to schedule are really just meaningful events. I can't tell you how many clients I've looked and seen what Aaron used to call death by task, where they schedule everything. No, all we want to schedule are those meaningful events, like a discovery call, like a scoping call, which is where we're trying to figure out whether we're, who to bring in from our side to talk to with them and what the next steps are as we march it down the pipeline, or this are we a fit call. Those are the things that we schedule. Again, this is nothing new. We adapted it from David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, but it really works well for SDRs because remember, SDRs are working hundreds more records than an AE. So we have a lot bigger universe and a lot bigger sampling of data and contacts and information to get through in order to give them their 8 to 10 qualified ops a month. So we need to be able to delegate what we can that makes sense. Questions to ask yourself are, what opportunities are there? Am I doing one-off emails? Are my reps doing one-off emails, or can we get them in a template library? That's another one I see all the time, that people have all these emails hoarded on their desktop. Let's get them into a template. Let's get them into a leverage technology there and get them into a template that actually tracks response rates. Wouldn't that be cool? Should we do personal versus automation and email? I'm a fan of, since we're starting with thousands of records, that we use technology to generate that first conversation, which is what predictable revenue is all about, and then personalize it as we get down to our top 20 in the working status. Once it moves from cold to working, I'm all about personalization and hyper-personalization, but to get it there, if we're working thousands of records in our extended universe, it's kind of hard. If you have your top 20, your account-based selling, they're already in working status because you know you want to go after them, then by all means, hyper-personalize. But put them in templates so you can really understand what conversations are impacting the movement of that record further into the pipeline. Always go with, how can I get this record going faster through the pipeline with quality that's resonating and that's getting us those conversations so that we feel confident we could forecast. The sales conversation itself, we can definitely selling the dream, that's from predictable revenue. How can we get that into a conversation template, or should that be something we delegate to marketing, and then once we get it back, flip it sideways and slice it up so that it works for us, because we need to know what level of awareness people are in as we're selling. We're not always going to be interested. They're not always going to be evaluating. They may be unaware of who we are. They may be kind of hands on hip saying, show me that you could really help me. So we want to at least get some of the major conversation points probably delegated, and then come together as a team and craft our own templates so that we can use them in getting those folks towards a qualified op. The tools and tech, I think we've said that to death about where to use that.
If I want to jump in real quick, Mary Lou, and give away, I guess, one of our trade secrets here. This seems like a good time to do it. And it's not just us; it's several other companies who are like us, who are growing SaaS companies, and how we've kind of pulled this together in a sense. Referrals, client reviews, and things like that, and referral calls. Taking the time to do more handcrafted, like devoting the time to be more handcrafted and one-on-one with those, has actually really been a little bit of a game changer for us going forward. Mm-hmm. And that's not just us. I've talked to a lot of people who, at the marketing level and at the sales level, they're literally almost driving. They're actually making themselves more efficient, making their whole process more efficient by focusing more that direction and getting those kinds of source leads. So that's worked for us. I'm not going to say it's going for everybody, but I personally have seen that probably have more of an impact in terms of like an actual thing you can start doing very quickly going forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, if we look at pure math and the number of records, those records represent a smaller subset of the total universe of accounts that you could close with high revenue potential and high likelihood of closing. So, that's where you make that decision as to, should I handcraft everything? And if so, what do those accounts look like? Are they ideal, which is what you're saying and sharing that they are? And then the rest, who I still want to contact, but I want to leverage technology for that, is all I'm saying, is that you really want to look at what that mix is. And then as things move down the pipeline, you get more and more personalized.
Absolutely. And and we were talking client referrals too, by the way, is what we're definitely, that's like the focus. Client success, calls and stuff like that with people who are interested. It seems like B2B referrals are just, that drives a lot of the buying decisions for us, at least. So
yes, it does. And that, again, for those of you who joined early, that's a source. That's a different source that we talked about before, about tracking the different sources of leads. And that will help guide you as to where you want to focus your efforts.
Exactly.
Bonus principle is to learn. Continuous sharpening of your knowledge. Again, the role playing is one place where you can ensure that you're going to learn on a daily basis. So you can put some of these things inside of the role play process, hit it 15 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, whatever it is, and it adds up over time. So I am asking you to just look at your day, chunk it into reasonable chunks, and be consistent with it. And that's going to get you where you want to go. It's going to reduce your stress level. It's going to give you those consistent opportunities you're looking for. And it's, the whole thing, like pennies a day. It's basically pennies a day of knowledge are going to build you where you want to go and get you to be that number one sales rep in the company.
Love it, Mary Lou. Any questions for anyone else before we go? I know we're over time, and Mary Lou, you have to you have to go here. I mean, if you want to finish up and hey, these final slides, feel free. But yeah, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I mean, we can just basically, this is my new framework. So the predictable revenue 5-step framework has morphed into 28 steps. And in the red blocks are the areas that I think are continuous learning blocks that I work with clients on for role playing. Just wanted to give you that visual as we ended this session.
Very, very neat. The periodic table.
Yep. The book, of course, Predictable Prospecting, it was released in August. I've gotten so many emails from people with questions or comments. So if you want to pick it up as a Christmas present to yourself, everything in there, we show examples of everything, including sequences and how to do emails. At the back of the book, there's a complete guide that goes through each of the constructs that we discuss in the book and how I use them to sell to Jeremy, who's the Director of Sales Ops. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add, we'll be giving away 5 copies of Predictable Prospecting to people who attend today's session. So next week we have session number 4, the final one in the series, and you can actually view the previous sessions, by the way, on the Ambition blog. Just go to the blog and look for if you go to ambition.com/blog and scroll down, you'll see them. And session 4 is how to retain and enhance current SDR talent. So we started with hiring and attracting reps, went to processes and technology. Now we've talked time management, sort of activity management, and lastly, we're going to talk about retention and just overall enhancement of who you currently have. So Mary Lou, thank you so much. It's been great. And everybody, thank you for attending, and we'll see you next week for session number 4 of the Sales Development Accelerator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you later.